Andy, you've served in the White House. I want to get your take on this dynamic surrounding President-elect Trump's top aides, especially the chief strategist, Steve Bannon, chief of staff, Reince Priebus. What's your take on these two positions? And take us behind the curtain a bit in terms of what the chief of staff does.
The chief of staff is responsible for a whole collection of, I'm going to say, obligations. First of all, he has to care about the care and feeding of the president, make sure the president is well cared for. And the president is always in a position where he can make a very tough decision with optimism. The second thing is he has to coordinate the policy process. How does the president get advice? Making sure that that advice does not come in as monolithic counsel, it comes in with diverse counsel, and that nobody is bullying the policy process. And finally, if the president makes a decision and nobody knows about it, did the president make a decision? The decisions the president makes should only be tough decisions, and frequently the decision will be announced only to the chief of staff, and he has to worry about how he tells people about it. That's the job of the chief of staff, and it's a huge responsibility. But I believe there should be one chief of staff, not 2, 3, 4, or 5, and that Reince Priebus is a terrific leader, and he'll be an outstanding chief of staff. I understand the role of Steve Bannon. There have always been a Steve Bannon-type character in every White House as someone who is kind of the protector of some final philosophy or direction or whatever. That's okay. I just don't want Steve Bannon to think that he would be the chief of staff. No, there's only one chief of staff at the time, and that would be Reince Priebus, and I think he'll do a good job. But the White House should not be a building where there is monolithic thinking, non-monolithic counsel for the president. There should be diverse thinking, challenge the president, educate the president, help the president, and then inspire those who have to implement the decisions the president makes to be able to implement that decision. Because the White House doesn't really get to implement anything. All they do is convey decisions to other departments and agencies where the decisions have to be implemented.
So given all of that, Mr. Carr, do you think that it is at all problematic or dangerous to President-elect Donald Trump to have such a lightning rod of a figure in Steve Bannon? Or do you think, you know what, that's his prerogative and he gets to have the guy he likes?
I say it's the president's prerogative. He gets to have whomever he wants around him to help advise him. I think they have to be careful. There should be somebody at the White House, and I hope it would be Reince Priebus, that would have peripheral vision, not just tunnel vision. See what is happening outside of the White House and how what is happening in the White House is perceived by those looking from the outside. And most of the people who work at the White House are there because they have outstanding tunnel vision. They know their area of expertise well. But the chief of staff's job is to understand how what happens in the White House is perceived by people outside the White House. And that's the trouble with a Steve Bannon. Unless you have the ability to, I'm going to say, recognize where the value is added and how that value added must be kept inside the White House, not overflow outside where it could create problems.
Andy, but it looks like that Donald Trump himself probably has the best peripheral vision of anybody associated with his campaign in terms of his ability to connect with the American people and talk to people between New York City and D.C. and Los Angeles and actually connect with them and resonate with them in a way that nobody else has.
Well, Ronald Reagan, I think, did a very good job of it. But I think Donald Trump does have a good, I'm going to say, thumb on the pulse of America. He kind of knows what's happening, and he'll be very good at tweeting and communicating with that. But he will be completely consumed with impossibly tough decisions that a president has to make. If the president is making an easy decision, the chief of staff didn't do his or her job. Presidents make brutally tough decisions, and those tough decisions, by definitions, will not be popular with everyone because they're going to be tough decisions.
Sure.
And so Donald Trump will have to recognize that he's not there to really please people. He's there to make the tough decisions for America that will keep America safe, that will lead the world to recognize that individuals have a role in their government. We're a democracy, and we want to invite others to have democracies, and our democracy has to work. And he also recognized that he has a responsibility to lead and govern. And govern is the toughest part of that leadership responsibility, because you have to lead a Congress that is separate but equal and doesn't always want to take your direction. You have to lead bureaucrats to do a job when you really can't hire and fire them at will. They are career public servants, and they want to be inspired to implement whatever you have to do. So that's the job of governing, and it's very different than leading a corporation or leading as a dictator.
Sure.
You have to lead and govern and inspire people to follow the direction you think is right for the country.
Great insights, Andy. Thanks so much. Andy Carr joining us there. By the way,